this is John Adams, and this is the Hue and Saturation tutorial for Photoshop. Today we're going to be working on the Photoshop adjustment called Hue and Saturation, and that is currently sitting in the Photoshop adjustments palette. And Hue and Saturation is the one that looks like color tone square that's below the brightness and contrast adjustment. So if we click on that, we will get that adjustment to show up, and it looks like that. So Hue and Saturation is one of my favorite adjustments because of the fact that I can adjust real subtly a lot of the different colors that are within the image itself, and I can adjust the saturation of them. So one of the first things that you will see, you can go into the master setting up here for the Hue and Saturation, and you can pull the slider one way or another. Of course, this way it's going to go more into the blues, and this way it'll go into the green. So you have to be very careful with these settings because of the fact that they are pretty extreme, and you have to be careful with them. The other thing you can do with saturation is you can bring it all the way down and get a fairly nice black and white image. I don't suggest that you do that. You can also reset your settings by going down here to the bottom of the properties palette where it says reset to adjust defaults, and it all goes back to 0. So lightness and brightness, so you can see it's lightness and brightness, which is very similar to brightness and contrast, which is in the adjustments palette. So I'm going to leave those at 0 right now. The main ones that I want to concentrate on are up in here in the face, because the fact that the gentleman's face is fairly red in color, and as you see in here, we can move those around and get some better adjustments to those. So instead of going into the master, the nice thing about Hue and Saturation, you can go into all these colors and isolate those and adjust them. So let's say in reds, I want to increase the blue in here because there is too much red. So I want to go to the opposite color in the color wheel. So as I pull this up, you can see there's more blue, or more red, or you can, or actually that's more blue, I'm sorry, and then you go to this side, it's more green, but you can see the blue will help a little bit, but there's, it's starting to make it look green with too much blue in there. But you can go in here and reduce the amount of red by going into the saturation, and you may want to readjust this afterwards slightly. So it looked pretty good the way it was, and then but lowering the saturation of the red. That's good. Lightness and brightness of the red, you know, that can help too. So you can get brighten it. It makes it look, the lightness looks a little bit lighter, more like a natural skin color instead of too red. You know, he could have been flushed that day in the face, and that could have affected it too. So you kind of have to look at the legs. Of course, these legs have not seen the sun for a while, and they're kind of pale. So, so that's the red adjustment. Yellows, as we go in here, we can adjust this more into the greens or into the blues. Now, there is not very many yellow, so it's affecting it slightly, but not very much. We can increase the saturation of the yellows in here, which kind of helps a little bit into the sand area. Of course, the sand is a little warm rather than being cool or too bright white. We can increase the lightness of the yellow itself, and you're not going to see too much. There is some in the little boy. As you exaggerate this, you can see that there's going to be some in here. If we make it too light, you're going to see a little bit, but there's really not much. The same thing with saturation. You overly saturate it, you can see all the areas that you're going to affect, and so on. So that's yellows. Let's see, greens. The only area of green is over here in the little slider. So you can increase the brightness of the green or decrease it. You know, it looks a little bit more natural, a little less color in here. You can lighten it or darken it. That looks, actually doesn't look too bad. You don't want to get too much attention to it unless that's the focus of your image. Let's see, and I think that's about it for the greens. We can spread the color around by using these adjustments down here to how they affect each other and how they meld together, but I don't think we need it on here. You can also use the targeted adjustment for saturation here too. You can do that also. So if it will affect it based on the green. So if I went in here and went into the greens, I can slide to the right or the left. So increasing the saturation or lowering the saturation. So notice this doesn't work the same as the other sliders for some of the other adjustments because it goes right to left instead of up and down as it does in curves. So I'm going to leave this a little brighter. The blues, cyans, so we can increase that a little bit, and that looks a little bit more purpley, or bring it to the green. And I think we're better off just putting this back to 0. Let's increase the saturation just a little bit. That looks good. Increases the amount of blue in there. And let's see the brightness. Do we want more brightness? If you go too far, you're going to get noise in your image, and you don't want that, so it's better to not go too far in one direction. So I'm going to bring this back to 0 again and see what that looks like. That looks fine. I'm going to go into the blues. Let's adjust the blues slightly and see if that will give us a nice color tone. I'm going a little bit more into the greens this time because the sky is starting to look a little noisy, so I'm going to bring this back down a little bit into the green area. If you want to saturate it a little bit, we can do that, or desaturate it. Lightness, I don't want it very light. I'd rather have the blues pretty intense. Okay, and then we'll go into the magenta. Now this is the area magenta would be part of the face, so you can see, should be able to see when I increase this, those areas. There's not very many areas, but you know, it should get lowered slightly. So let's go back into the reds and take a look at that again. I have it at 22, and you can see what the reds actually affect by increasing the saturation. And I like that. Let's see. We want some warmness in here, but not too much. So we can also isolate areas in adjustments, but we'll talk about that later with creating masks and other ways to make targeted adjustments. But for now, if we go into levels, layers in your layers palette where it has hue and saturation, you can turn this on and off. And by going in here, you can turn it on and off, and you'll see a slight difference, not a lot, but that way you can see what you've done. You've made some changes, but it's not a huge amount of change in here. So, but everything's a little subtle, and the subtle adjustments are okay. This works really good for color cast, where you can use the saturations on the different colors to lower the saturation to affect certain areas more than others. So this is looks really good, and we're going to end this tutorial here, and then we'll go on to vibrance and color, the color mixer after this. All right, thank you.